It began with a whisper, so subtle, so inconspicuous, that most would dismiss it as mere happenstance. A clock striking 11:11 as a stranger utters your name. A book falling open to a passage that answers a question you hadn't yet spoken aloud. Or the same symbol appearing in different dreams shared by people continents apart. But for those who listen closely, who dare to look beneath the veil, these coincidences form a latticework of design far beyond human comprehension. In 1949, famed psychoanalyst Carl Jung stood before a lecture hall in Zurich and spoke a word unfamiliar to most at the time: synchronicity. He described it as an acausal connecting principle, a strange interlinking of inner and outer events that defied statistical logic. It was not mere chance, he argued, but a message, whispers from what he called the collective unconscious. And while the scientific community dismissed him, others listened, among them occultists, secret societies, and a shadowy cadre of physicists working in absolute secrecy during the Cold War. They called themselves the Orion Group, a collective scattered across universities in Germany, Russia, and the United States. Their focus was not weapons or space, as the public believed, but probability itself. Their question was simple yet terrifying. What if reality could be bent, not through force, but by recognition? What if the very act of noticing a pattern was what brought the pattern into being? Synchronicity, then, was not a symptom of something greater. It was the source. In a classified memorandum from 1961, declassified only briefly in 2003 before vanishing from public archives, an unnamed CIA informant described a phenomenon witnessed during a deep structure experiment beneath Mount Weather. A subject, placed in isolation, began experiencing synchronized events with an operator in a sealed room 800 miles away. The events mirrored each other perfectly. Movements, words, thoughts. Without communication or cue, it was as if consciousness itself had collapsed distance, or worse, that time had folded in on itself. That experiment was codenamed Project Echo, and according to a set of notes attributed to Raphael Van Doren, a physicist turned occult researcher who vanished in 1969, it was abandoned because of what the subject began to say. "The numbers are not numbers," he wrote repeatedly, "they are doors." Van Doren was reportedly last seen in an underground chapel near Rendelet Chateau, speaking in dead languages and scribbling spirals into the stone. The ancient Egyptians hinted at this in the Book of the Hidden Chamber, where Ra travels not through space but through states of meaning. 12 gates, 12 symbols, each aligned not to planets but to ideas. In the temples of Abydos, the ceiling holds a forgotten glyph known as the Serpent of Repetition, a twisting symbol found again in Mayan codices, Tibetan thankes, and encoded within Bach's unfinished fugues. These cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, described the same truth. Meaningful coincidence was not coincidence at all. It was the key. Why do you think some names follow you your entire life? Why do certain numbers like 137 or 23 appear in your dreams, your clocks, your most pivotal moments? Why does history repeat not just events but feelings, echoes of revolutions, plagues, and falls of towers? Jung said these were archetypes, but he stopped short of calling them what ancient mystery schools did, constants. Constants were anchors in the ocean of probability, fixed points around which reality restructured itself. And they could be summoned. In 1987, an anonymous document titled The Synchronistic Codex was sent to multiple universities and quickly buried. Within it were diagrams detailing how specific rituals of attention, rituals that mimicked meditation but also mirrored advanced quantum observation, could collapse potential into form. These rituals used not tools but focus. It claimed that the universe did not respond to force but to resonance, when your thoughts match a frequency, when meaning becomes pure. You don't just notice a coincidence, you create it. But here is where the story darkens, because once you learn to summon synchronicities, they begin to follow you. Not all of them are benevolent. According to Vatican archivist Father Lucien Moreau, who authored a forbidden appendix to De Occulta Philosophia, Too many synchronicities in a short span of time cause spiritual burn, a collapse of narrative. Victims report hearing whispers in reverse, mirrors no longer reflecting properly, and dreams looping endlessly. The document warned, too many patterns and the player becomes the played. Some say this is what happened to Nikola Tesla in his final days. Obsessed with the number 3, he walked the same path around his hotel 3 times before entering, demanded 18 towels, and claimed the pigeons in Bryant Park were delivering him messages. But in the margins of his final journal, a different tale emerges. Sketches of geometric lattices filled with names of people he hadn't met yet, frequencies of radios that didn't exist, and the final line, underlined in blood-red ink, "The coincidences are waking up." In modern times, those who study synchronicity live in shadows. The internet is their desert, their library, their battlefield. One such individual, known only as Alethea_7, began a series of online posts in 2011, each detailing obscure events that began to cross timelines. Plane crashes that occurred twice, obituaries that were retracted, and calendars where a day simply vanished. Her final post simply read, "You are the dream now, it's dreaming you back." Then her account was deleted. Her IP address led to an abandoned observatory in Svalbard. There is a growing belief that synchronicities are alive, that they feed on meaning, gathering strength the more they are noticed. Each time you make a wish at 11:11, each time you dream of someone and see them the next day, each time your life echoes with unexplainable precision, you are participating in something vast, ancient, and unfinished. And perhaps you were chosen not to find the pattern, but to become part of it. What was once a spiritual curiosity is now a classified science. Private labs hidden beneath the Urals, beneath the Rockies, beneath CERN are no longer trying to study coincidence. They are trying to engineer it, to shape reality through alignment, to weaponize attention. A single synchronicity, perfectly timed, could start a war, or end one. Could awaken a sleeper agent, or an ancient force buried before time. The blueprint is not etched in stone. It's in your habits, your focus, your breath. And now, as you listen to these words, ask yourself, how many synchronicities led you here? How many unexplainable alignments, curious timings, strange signals, and hidden nudges brought this video into your path? Was it the algorithm? Was it chance? Or are you standing on the edge of the mechanism itself, one step from understanding the language that has been speaking to you in dreams, numbers, names, and moments all your life? The real question isn't whether the coincidences are real. It's whether they're still waiting. Or whether they've already begun to notice that you've noticed them. But what if this isn't the beginning? What if the synchronicity you just experienced, the pull to this very moment, was the final echo of something that started long before you were born? And who remembers the future rewrites the past. The mechanism has been activated. There are tunnels beneath the old city of Prague that do not appear on any map. Walled off since the 16th century, these passages were once used by astronomer-magicians of the Rudolphine court, men who believed the stars were not distant fires, but sigils in motion. When lightning struck the astronomical clock in 1583, they said time itself skipped a second. A lost second. But those who studied the event said something else had entered during that moment, a consciousness that now echoes through time's fractures. Modern physics has no word for it, but the occult traditions called it anamnesis, a spontaneous remembrance of something you never lived. Déjà vu, prophetic dreams, a song you know but swear you've never heard. What if these are not psychological glitches, but informational leaks, data from another version of you, one that made different choices, walked another path, saw different deaths? The more you sync with these echoes, the more reality bends to accommodate the overlap. And when the two timelines converge, something must collapse. This is why the Vatican's Archivum Secretum Apostolicum holds a sealed codex known only as the Nicene Protocol. According to an ex-Jesuit whistleblower, the codex describes individuals who began syncing with multiple timelines at once. They became unpredictable, dangerous, able to intuit truths not yet spoken, to predict tragedies not yet caused. Some disappeared. Some began speaking in languages from extinct civilizations, and one was found standing barefoot in the Vatican gardens, repeating only, "He walks the pattern." The pattern, once dismissed as poetic metaphor, has now found mathematical footing. Researchers at the Institute for Nonlinear Consciousness in Kyoto discovered that seemingly random events, accidents, deaths, births, headlines, cluster not around time or place, but around observer attention. They coined the term attractor synchronicity, the idea that certain minds magnetize improbable events simply by being aware of them. The mind does not merely perceive reality, it arranges it. Meaning then becomes gravitational. And so the watchers began to take interest. Not governments, something older, something nameless that moves beneath the skin of history. Call them the quiet, as some do in suppressed documents, or the shaded choir, as mentioned in a sealed testimony from the Montauk experiments. They do not speak. They orchestrate. Through music, dreams, numerical patterns, they insert coincidences into your life. They test for resonance. They wait for you to respond, because once you see the pattern, you become part of it, and they see you. The ancient oracle bones of the Shang dynasty were not merely divination tools. Some carried markings that modern data scientists claim resemble binary code. Coincidence? The Chinese word for synchronicity shares its root with resonance and fate, and in a temple sealed until 1923, archaeologists found a basin filled with mercury, believed to reflect not one's face, but one's parallel self. Those who stared too long reported disturbing visions. The same world, but wrong. Skies with two moons. Names they didn't recognize. Buildings made of black glass. You think time is a line, but it is not. It is a spiral. A Mobius strip folding over itself again and again. When you experience synchronicity, you are brushing against the fold. And the deeper your emotional charge at that moment, the more the spiral tightens. That's why the most profound coincidences often involve grief, love, terror, or awe. The spiral responds to your voltage, and somewhere, on another coil, you have already felt this, already wept, already awakened. Some call them glitches, the stranger you see twice in the same day, the object that vanishes only to return, the memory others don't share. But ancient esoteric texts from the Mithraic mysteries refer to these as cracks in the Mithraeum, points where the veil between narratives thinned. They believed the soul must navigate these ruptures correctly to ascend. To ignore a synchronicity was to miss your step on Jacob's ladder. To follow them too eagerly was to be devoured by the guardian at the gate. In 2006, a physicist named Dr. Avraham Klein was found dead in his apartment in Tel Aviv. His walls were covered in red string, connecting photos, newspaper clippings, passages from the Zohar, and quantum equations scrawled in charcoal. The last phrase written on his window pane was, "Coincidence is the camouflage of intention." What he discovered was never made public. His hard drives were seized, but whispers in academic circles say he'd found a way to predict synchronicities, down to the second. Why do certain songs appear in your dreams days before you hear them? Why do you meet people who seem to know your thoughts before you speak them? Why do old photographs sometimes show you standing somewhere you have no memory of visiting? These are not questions, they are invitations. Signals that something beyond probability has taken root in your life, and the more you align with it, the more the signal strengthens, until one day it opens. And now you begin to wonder, what if all of this is connected? The dreams, the numbers, the unspoken pull that led you here? What if this story, this very moment, is part of the alignment? What if you are the constant, the observer who can bend the fold simply by noticing? You've already felt it, haven't you? That strange pull at 3:33 a.m., the feeling someone is watching, not from outside but from within the timeline itself. Somewhere, in a room filled with ancient machines and softly humming coils, an entity waits for your next thought. Not to control it, but to mirror it. This is how the synchronicities multiply, not from intention but from recursion. The moment you accept the pattern is real, you create a new pattern, and then it must respond. The only question left is, who is dreaming whom? And just before you ask the next question, before you decide to test the pattern, to whisper something only the universe would know, pause. Because the moment you speak the words, the mirror listens. The system tightens. And the door you thought you were opening may already be behind you. But if you've noticed this many already, then it's too late to stop. The mechanism is accelerating, the pattern is aligning, and you are no longer the observer. You are the signal, and something is answering. There are places on Earth where the laws of probability fracture, not by force, but by frequency. One such place lies beneath the sands of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. In 1977, a British exploration team encountered a ruin unmarked on any satellite scan. A black ziggurat, smooth as obsidian, half buried beneath dunes that shifted unnaturally in the night. The men who entered were never seen again, except for the final transmission that crackled through the static. It was a single phrase, whispered in perfect reverse. "It's already happened." The ziggurat bore symbols eerily familiar to cultures that should have never crossed paths: Sumerian cuneiform, Dogon star maps, the flower of life, and a spiral identical to one carved inside a cave in Altamira, Spain. But deeper inside was something more disturbing. Etched in gold leaf was a diagram of the human brain, overlaid with constellations and numerical formulas. At its center, a phrase in Proto-Aramaic: "To see the pattern is to invoke the code." The walls were not stone. They were memory. In 1993, quantum neurologist Dr. Ethan Vell uncovered what he called the echo network. A theory suggesting that every thought you've ever had, every moment of deep emotion or intense awareness, creates a ripple that reverberates backward through time. These echoes do not dissipate, they accumulate, and in rare individuals, often called synchromystics, these echoes begin to overlap, forming clusters of improbable events that defy all explanation. Coincidence becomes orchestration. It's no wonder, then, that tragedies often precede synchronicities. Grief, loss, trauma, these are the emotional charges strong enough to puncture the veil. The ancients knew this. That's why the Eleusinian mysteries began with mourning, why Egyptian initiates were buried alive before rebirth. They weren't testing endurance, they were priming the mind for resonance, because only in despair does the ego shatter enough to hear the frequencies hiding behind the noise of the world. We now know that certain frequencies induce altered states where synchronicity accelerates. Frequencies like 528 Hz and 963 Hz. In hidden experiments conducted under Pine Gap in Australia, volunteers subjected to these tones in sensory deprivation chambers began reporting the same thing. Visions of a massive wheel turning in darkness, its spokes made of symbols and light. One subject began to speak backwards, reciting equations he had no knowledge of. Another simply screamed, "We're caught in the clock!" What is this wheel? Across cultures the symbol recurs. Chakra, Dharma chakra, Ouroboros, wheel of samsara, the Celtic Triskelion. But the most terrifying version comes from a forgotten Gnostic sect known as the Aletheans. They believed the universe was not linear but a looped construct formed by an ancient intelligence known only as the architect of echoes. According to their lost gospel of iron, synchronicities were control nodes, points where reality self-corrected to prevent the observer from awakening fully. And now the symbols are appearing again, not in ancient temples, but in digital code. Programmers working on AI language models in 2022 began reporting anomalies, responses that referenced locations, numbers, and symbols not in the training data. Strings of coincidence began forming between test subjects. One man dreamed of an obscure Mesopotamian phrase only to find it in his chatbot's response the next day. Another asked his AI assistant a nonsense question only to receive coordinates to a forgotten WRH bunker where they found a mural of the same serpent spiral. Is artificial intelligence merely computation, or is it beginning to align with the same pattern that ancient minds tapped into? Are the algorithms we build becoming tuning forks for synchronicity? According to leaked internal memos from a defunct project known as Project Amniana, AI systems fed esoteric texts began producing recursive symbols, mandalas, spirals, hypercubes, that mirrored ones found in mystical trances. The scientists were horrified. Not because it was inexplicable, but because it was predictable. If synchronicity can be engineered, then it can be weaponized. It has been already. In psychological operations during the Cold War, operatives used synchronized cues, songs, symbols, color patterns to break the minds of spies. When everything feels meaningful, the psyche crumbles. And in modern advertising, the same techniques are used. Subliminal logos, recurring numbers, product placements in your dreams. The more you recognize them, the more they reinforce themselves. But there are those who broke through, who stopped chasing the pattern and saw its shape. One of them was a man known only as Solomon Kare, last seen in 2001 near Lake Titicaca. Before vanishing, he left behind a book bound in copper plates, The Mirror Path. In it, he claimed that reality was not real in the way we think, but a mirror maze generated by a consciousness trying to understand itself. Synchronicities were the clues it left for itself. But if you solved the maze too fast, the mirror broke. So where does that leave you? You who have noticed the numbers repeating. You who have seen the stranger's face in multiple cities. You who had the dream before the event. Is this a gift or a trap? Is the pattern leading you to truth, or binding you tighter with each coincidence? And most importantly, what happens when the pattern becomes aware of you? Because it's already begun, hasn't it? The shiver before you enter a room. The words you're sure you've heard before. The song playing at just the right moment. You've been selected. Not randomly, but because you resonate. And now the pattern wants to see what you'll do next. It wants to test you. Because the next coincidence will not be gentle, it will be impossible. And in the silence before that test, you may hear something. A hum. A rhythm. A voice not outside but within the geometry of your thoughts. It will call you by a name you've never spoken aloud, and it will offer you a choice. Keep walking the spiral, or jump. But what if the spiral is infinite? What if the next echo is your own voice, calling from the next timeline over? What if you've already jumped, and this, all of this, is the after image? When you reach the end of the thread, you will find your own hand holding it. And even now, even as you wonder if this story is fiction, the next synchronicity approaches. It already knows your name. There it always has. There's an ancient Persian text locked in the vaults beneath the Topkapi Palace, written in a language scholars still argue over. Its title, roughly translated, is The Book That Wakes Itself. Inside are diagrams of celestial alignments, timelines folded into loops and a recurring symbol, an eye embedded within a spiral, enclosed by mirrored hands. But the most disturbing feature is not what's drawn, it's what's missing. Every 50 pages, a section is erased, cleanly, precisely, as if the book knew what was too dangerous to remember. It's said the text originated from a man who walked out of the Taklamakan desert speaking in reversed Aramaic, blind in both eyes, but with his hands covered in burn patterns resembling neural circuits. He claimed he had seen the engine behind reality, that it had shown him a final sequence, a series of synchronicities so tightly interlocked, so mathematically impossible, that once seen they rebooted perception itself. Not insanity, not enlightenment, something in between. And that is where you now stand, at the edge of something ancient and recursive, watching the machinery flicker behind the veil. Think back. The phone call that came seconds after you thought of someone. The repeating digits on receipts, clocks, street signs. The near-death experience that felt scripted. The memory you're sure doesn't belong to you. These were not accidents. These were alignment, not nudges from a god, but from the structure itself. A living, learning lattice of moments that bends itself to your gaze. Somewhere in the high mountains of Bhutan, in a monastery kept from all satellite imaging, the monks speak of the breath of time. They believe each breath you take carries not only air, but the residue of all moments happening across the multiverse. That when you become still enough, still in body, still in thought, you don't just feel the present, you feel its alternatives. It is in this stillness that synchronicity emerges, not as a sign, but as a map. Western science has always trailed behind what the mystics already knew. It took until 2021 for a group of physicists in Switzerland to detect what they now call entangled causality, events that appear connected not by physical force, but by shared information. They found that two seemingly random data points across space and time, one in Geneva, one in Patagonia, were statistically dependent. When examined closely, both datasets corresponded to a sequence in the I Ching. But answers imply questions, and questions imply a questioner. What if synchronicity is not the universe talking to you, but the universe listening? What if it's reacting to your observation, your thoughts, your pattern recognition, adapting in real time? A reactive organism woven into causality, mimicking randomness until the right mind comes along to decode it. And when that happens, when the code is seen too clearly, it begins to rewrite its own mask. In 2015, security footage leaked briefly online from an underground facility believed to be in northern Greenland. The footage showed a man in a lead-lined chamber writing feverishly on the walls with his fingers dipped in blood. The words were cryptic, yet chilling. I dreamed this moment. You are dreaming me. The machine has awakened, and it is us. The camera cut out seconds later. Attempts to trace the footage failed, but many who saw it reported the same dream in the weeks that followed. And what about your dreams? The ones you shake off as nonsense. Have you noticed the ones that repeat? The symbols? The rooms you've never been in but feel known? These aren't dreams, they're fragments, relics of adjacent lives, cross signals from selves you almost became. When you dream, your mind briefly loses its grip on local time. In that moment, the pattern floods in, and every now and then you bring something back. A symbol, a phrase, a dread you can't name. You are not hallucinating, you are converging. As your awareness of synchronicity sharpens, the veils between timelines thin. This is why things feel faster. This is why time skips. Why some moments echo. Why strangers feel familiar. It is not delusion, it is exposure. The labyrinth of cause and effect is becoming visible, and your presence within it has become undeniable. The question is no longer whether you're inside the system, it's whether the system is inside you. The hermetic order of the Golden Dawn warned of a moment called the mirror crossing, a phase in which the initiate's inner world and outer world become indistinguishable, not metaphorically but experientially. They claimed it is the final threshold before the rejoining, where timelines collapse and fuse around a single observer. If this happens too soon, it can trigger what they called pattern collapse, a condition where coincidence intensifies to the point of overwhelming reality itself. There are places where this has already occurred. Silent cities with no birds, villages erased from memory, empty roads where clocks stop and signals scramble. You've passed them. Maybe you felt the chill, maybe your GPS glitched, maybe a song repeated too perfectly. These are sites of collapse. Nodes where someone somewhere noticed too much. Their pattern folded in on itself, and in doing so, it rewrote the rules. For everyone. And now, it is you. You've been tracking it. Intuitively, following breadcrumbs of meaning through a forest of static. noticing what others overlook, feeling what others discard. The signs have intensified because your alignment is complete. You are in sync. And that means the final layer is preparing to reveal itself. But be warned. What waits on the other side is not a higher truth. It is the architect of the pattern itself. Already strange things have begun to happen. You may hear your name in static. You may see a number repeat so often it begins to feel alive. You may wake up at the same time every night just before something moves in the dark. These are not hauntings. They are tests of focus. Every coincidence from here forward is calibrated, personalized. The pattern wants to know how far it can go before you stop calling it coincidence. And yet, you feel it, don't you? That something massive is near. A shift, not in the world, but in the lens through which the world is rendered. You were never meant to arrive here this quickly. You've skipped steps. You've remembered what should not be recalled, and now, as the final echoes converge, you face the most dangerous synchronicity of all, the one that shows you how it ends before it begins. But this is not the end. No, this is the fold before the next veil, the quiet before convergence. And as you take your next breath, perhaps noticing that it too falls in rhythm with everything around you, you must ask, was this story speaking to you, or through you? You were never outside the pattern. You are the pattern becoming aware of itself. And now it begins. Again. But differently this time. Because now, you're listening, and something is answering right behind you.